Have you ever witnessed something so extraordinary that it left you speechless? A moment so powerful that you knew instantly your life would never be the same. Now imagine not just one such moment, but 7 earth-shattering events, each more astonishing than the last, all unfolding within hours of each other. Today I'm going to take you on an unforgettable journey through time, back to ancient Jerusalem, where the most remarkable chain of events in human history was about to unfold. What you're about to hear isn't just another historical account. This is the story of how the world changed forever in a matter of hours. 7 unprecedented events that left even the most hardened skeptics questioning everything they believed. These events were so extraordinary that they were recorded not just by followers, but by neutral observers and even opponents of the movement. They transformed not just Jerusalem, but the entire course of human history. The first event, the Great Darkness. Picture yourself standing in Jerusalem on what seemed like an ordinary spring afternoon. The markets are bustling with activity, traders calling out their wares, pilgrims flowing through the streets. The sun is high in the sky, its warm rays beating down on the limestone buildings. But then, something impossible happens. At the height of day, when the sun should be at its brightest, darkness begins to fall. This isn't the gentle dimming of an approaching storm or the brief shadow of a passing cloud. No, this is something far more terrifying and profound. Total darkness in the middle of the day spreading across the entire land. Imagine the panic, the confusion. Merchants in the marketplace frantically trying to protect their goods, children clinging to their mothers, priests in the temple freezing in mid-ceremony. Even the Roman soldiers, the mighty representatives of the world's greatest empire, standing uneasily at their posts, gripping their weapons a little tighter. This supernatural darkness lasted for 3 full hours. Think about that for a moment. 3 hours of inexplicable darkness in the middle of the day. This wasn't a solar eclipse, which typically lasts only a few minutes. This was something else entirely, something that defied natural explanation. Historical records tell us that this darkness was observed not just in Jerusalem, but across the region. The Roman historian Thallus wrote about it. The Greek historian Phlegon recorded it in his chronicles. This wasn't mass hysteria or local phenomenon. This was a regional event that caught the attention of ancient historians. The second event, the Earth's violent response. But the darkness was just the beginning. As if the sky itself wearing mourning wasn't enough, nature had an even more dramatic display in store. Just as the mysterious darkness began to lift, the ground beneath Jerusalem began to shake. This wasn't a minor tremor or the distant rumbling of a faraway quake. This was a violent, powerful earthquake that shook the very foundations of the holy city. The timing was precise and devastating, occurring at the exact moment of the final breath on the cross at Golgotha. Picture the scene. The ground convulsing beneath your feet. The sound of stones clattering down the narrow streets of Jerusalem. The crash of pottery shattering. People rushing from buildings crying out in terror. The earthquake's impact was felt throughout the city, its tremors reaching even to the sacred Temple Mount. Witnesses described rocks splitting apart, ancient walls cracking, and tombs breaking open. This wasn't just any earthquake. It was as if the earth itself was reacting to the cosmic significance of what was taking place. The Roman centurion standing guard, a man who had witnessed countless executions, was so shaken by the combination of events that he uttered words that would have been considered treason against Rome. Surely this was no ordinary man. The third event, the temple's mysterious transformation. But perhaps the most astonishing event was what happened in the heart of Jerusalem, in the most sacred space in Judaism, the temple itself. Within the temple hung an enormous curtain, 60 feet high and 4 inches thick, woven from fine purple and blue linen. This wasn't just any curtain. It was the sacred veil that separated the holy place from the most holy place, the barrier between humanity and the most sacred space in Jewish worship. At the exact moment of the earthquake, something unprecedented occurred. This massive curtain, which required 70 priests to handle when it was installed, was torn in two. But here's the remarkable detail that left witnesses stunned. It wasn't torn from bottom to top, as would happen if human hands had done the deed. Instead, it was torn from top to bottom, as if rent by an unseen hand from above. The significance of this event cannot be overstated. This curtain had stood as a symbol of separation between God and humanity for centuries. Only the high priest could pass beyond it, and then only once a year on the Day of Atonement. Its tearing marked a fundamental change in how humanity could approach the divine. The barrier was removed, the old system of separation abolished in a single dramatic moment. The priests serving in the temple that day must have been terrified. Imagine their shock and confusion as they witnessed this sacred barrier, this symbol of divine separation, being torn apart by an invisible force. The sound of the thick fabric ripping would have echoed through the temple courts, adding to the chaos of the earthquake and the lingering effects of the mysterious darkness. But these three earth-shattering events were just the beginning. What happened next would shake the foundations of faith and transform the lives of everyone who witnessed it. In our next segment, we'll explore the fourth extraordinary event that occurred on this remarkable day, a happening so unprecedented that it would leave even the most skeptical observers questioning everything they believed. Stay with me as we continue this incredible journey through the 7 events that changed the world forever. What you're about to hear next will challenge everything you thought you knew about history, faith, and the power of divine intervention in human affairs. The darkness had lifted, the earthquake had subsided, and the temple curtain lay torn in two. But the extraordinary events in Jerusalem were far from over. What happened next would challenge our understanding of life, death, and everything in between. These next revelations were so astonishing that they would transform even the most hardened skeptics into believers. The fourth event, the awakening. As the dust settled from the earthquake, something unprecedented began to occur throughout Jerusalem. The earthquake hadn't just shaken the city's foundations, it had opened ancient tombs carved into the rock. But what happened next defies natural explanation. Historical accounts tell us that many holy people who had died were raised to life. Let that sink in for a moment. These weren't strangers or unknown individuals. These were people known to the community, people whose funerals had been attended by the very same residents who now encountered them alive. Imagine walking through Jerusalem and meeting someone you had personally helped bury months or even years ago. These weren't ghost stories or vague spiritual encounters. These were physical appearances, witnessed by multiple people throughout the city. Family members recognized their loved ones. Friends encountered those they had mourned. The streets of Jerusalem became the scene of joyful reunions that defied the natural order. Think about the impact of these appearances. In a culture where family ties and community connections ran deep, these encounters couldn't be dismissed as mass hysteria or mistaken identity. These were intimate, personal recognitions. A son embracing the father he had buried. A wife conversing with the husband whose tomb she had visited just days before. The accounts tell us that these resurrected individuals entered the holy city and appeared to many people. This wasn't a secret event witnessed by a select few. This was a public demonstration that touched countless lives throughout Jerusalem. The very fabric of reality seemed to be unraveling, revealing something profound about the nature of life, death, and what lay beyond. The fifth event, the guard's transformation. While these extraordinary reunions were taking place throughout Jerusalem, another remarkable scene was unfolding at Golgotha. The Roman guards stationed at the cross, hardened soldiers who had witnessed countless executions, were experiencing something that would change them forever. These weren't ordinary soldiers. These were members of the Roman legion, the most disciplined and formidable military force of their time. They were trained to remain stoic and unmoved, to carry out their duties without emotion or hesitation. They had presided over numerous crucifixions, seeing death in all its brutal forms. But what they witnessed that day was different. The centurion and his men had stood watch through it all. The supernatural darkness, the devastating earthquake, the final moments. They had heard the last words, felt the ground shake beneath their feet, and seen things that their military training had never prepared them for. The impact on these battle-hardened men was profound. Historical records tell us that the centurion, a man who commanded 100 soldiers and represented the might of Rome, was the first to speak. His words, recorded by multiple sources, reveal the depth of his transformation. Surely this was the Son of God. Consider the significance of this declaration. This wasn't a follower or sympathizer making this claim. This was a Roman officer, a representative of the empire that had carried out the execution. His words carried weight not just because of his rank, but because of his position as a neutral observer. He had no reason to fabricate or embellish what he had seen. The soldiers with him echoed his sentiment, their hardened military demeanor giving way to awe and reverence. These men, who had divided the garments and cast lots at the foot of the cross, now found themselves witnesses to events that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The sixth event, the courage of the secret followers. As evening approached, something remarkable happened that would demonstrate how these events were already transforming lives. Two men stepped forward from the shadows of secrecy into the light of public declaration. Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, both members of the Jewish ruling council, revealed themselves as followers. This was no small act of courage. These were men of status and influence, members of the very council that had condemned Jesus to death. By stepping forward to claim his body and provide an honorable burial, they were risking everything: their positions, their reputations, their very lives. Joseph, described as a rich man and respected member of the council, went boldly to Pilate to request the body. This was unprecedented. To ask for the body of an executed criminal was to associate oneself with their cause. It was to risk being branded a sympathizer, a dangerous position in those volatile times. Nicodemus, who had once visited under the cover of darkness to ask questions, now came openly, bringing an extraordinary amount of burial spices, 75 pounds of myrrh and aloes. This was a quantity fit for royalty, a public declaration of honor and respect that could not be ignored. Together, these prominent men took the body down from the cross. With tender care and devotion, they wrapped it in clean linen cloth along with the spices, according to Jewish burial customs. They placed it in Joseph's own new tomb, one that had never been used, carved out of solid rock in a garden near the Crucifixion site. But even as these two men completed their act of devotion, forces were already in motion that would lead to the next extraordinary event. What happened next would shake the foundations of power in Jerusalem and set in motion a chain of events that continues to impact our world today. Stay with me as we explore the final events that would transform not just Jerusalem, but the entire course of human history. The most astonishing revelations are yet to come, and what you're about to hear will challenge everything you thought you knew about the power of divine intervention in human affairs. The sun was setting over Jerusalem, casting long shadows across the city that had witnessed so many extraordinary events. But as darkness fell, another series of remarkable occurrences was about to unfold, events that would leave an indelible mark on history and transform the lives of everyone involved. The seventh event, the sealed tomb. As night approached, an unexpected delegation made its way to Pontius Pilate's residence. The religious leaders, still uneasy despite everything that had happened, had one more request. They remembered a prophecy, a claim that after 3 days everything would change. These wise men, these scholars of ancient texts, found themselves troubled by the possibilities. Imagine the scene. These prestigious leaders, who had witnessed the supernatural darkness and felt the earth shake beneath their feet, now stood before Pilate with an unusual request. They wanted guards, not just any guards, but Roman soldiers to secure the tomb. Their fear was palpable. What if the followers came in the night? What if they stole the body and claimed a miracle? Pilate granted their request, but he did more than just post guards. He ordered the tomb to be sealed with the official Roman seal. This wasn't just a simple barrier. It was a declaration of Roman authority. Breaking this seal wasn't just interference with a burial site. It was an offense against Rome itself, punishable by death. The Roman guards took their positions. These weren't local militia or temple guards. These were elite Roman soldiers, men whose very lives depended on performing their duty. They secured the massive stone that had been rolled in front of the tomb's entrance, carefully applied the Roman seal, and began their vigil. Picture these hardened soldiers standing watch through the night. They had witnessed remarkable things that day: the darkness, the earthquake, the torn temple veil. Now they stood guard over a tomb, watching for any sign of disturbance. Little did they know they were about to become witnesses to something even more extraordinary. As the first hints of dawn began to color the eastern sky, something unprecedented occurred. The historical accounts tell us that the guards experienced something so terrifying that it left them paralyzed with fear. These battle-hardened men, trained to face any threat, fell to the ground like dead men. What could terrify Roman soldiers so completely? The accounts speak of an appearance so brilliant it turned night into day, a presence so powerful it made the earth shake once again. The massive stone, which had required several men to roll into place, was moved aside as if it weighed nothing. But here's what makes this account even more compelling. These same guards, who had been posted to prevent any claims of resurrection, became the first witnesses to something they couldn't explain. Their testimony was so problematic for the religious authorities that they had to be bribed to keep quiet. Think about that. These soldiers risked death by abandoning their post, yet they maintained their story. As the sun rose fully over Jerusalem, a small group of women made their way to the tomb. They came carrying spices, expecting to perform the final burial rites. Their hearts were heavy with grief, their minds probably still processing the extraordinary events they had witnessed. But what they found changed everything. The massive stone, the one they had been wondering how to move, was already rolled away. The Roman seal was broken. The guards were nowhere to be seen, and most importantly, the tomb was empty. This wasn't a case of grave robbery. The grave clothes were still there, carefully folded. All the expensive burial spices provided by Nicodemus remained. No thief would have taken the time to unwrap the body and leave the valuable spices behind. No follower trying to fake a resurrection would have thought to fold the grave clothes. What happened next defies natural explanation. The women encountered a presence that left them both terrified and filled with joy. They received a message that would change the course of history. He is not here. He has risen. But this was just the beginning. Over the next 40 days, numerous encounters would take place throughout Jerusalem and beyond. These weren't vague spiritual experiences or distant sightings. These were physical, tangible encounters that transformed lives. Think about Thomas, the skeptic who demanded physical proof. Picture him being invited to touch the wounds, to verify for himself that this was no hallucination. Consider the two travelers on the road to Emmaus, who spent hours in conversation before recognizing their companion. Imagine the scene by the Sea of Galilee, where breakfast was cooked on the shore. These encounters weren't limited to believers. James, who had been skeptical during his brother's ministry, became a leader in the early movement after his own experience. Saul, a fierce opponent who had been hunting down followers, had an encounter so profound it transformed him into one of the movement's most passionate advocates. The impact of these events spread rapidly through Jerusalem. People who had been in hiding now spoke boldly in the streets. Those who had fled in fear returned with courage. The movement that authorities had tried to crush on Friday was exploding by Sunday. Consider the transformation of Peter. This man who had denied even knowing Jesus just days before, now stood boldly in the streets of Jerusalem proclaiming what he had witnessed. What could cause such a dramatic change in a person who had been paralyzed by fear just days earlier? But the story doesn't end here. What happened next would shake the foundations of the ancient world and launch a movement that continues to transform lives today. Stay with me as we explore the final part of this extraordinary journey, how these 7 events in Jerusalem set in motion changes that would reshape human history forever. The events we've witnessed in Jerusalem were just the beginning. What happened next would spark a transformation so profound that its impact continues to ripple through history. In this final chapter of our journey, we'll discover how these 7 extraordinary events launched a movement that would change the world forever. Picture yourself back in Jerusalem, just weeks after these remarkable events. The city is buzzing with unprecedented energy. The same streets that had witnessed the earthquake and darkness now overflow with people sharing their experiences. The transformation is extraordinary. Those who had been hiding in fear are now boldly proclaiming their message in the temple courts. But what makes this movement different from any other in history? It's the eyewitnesses. These aren't people passing along stories they've heard. These are individuals who experienced these events firsthand. The temple guard who felt the ground shake beneath his feet. The merchant who witnessed the supernatural darkness. The family members who encountered their resurrected loved ones walking the streets. Most compelling of all are the 500 people who encountered the risen Christ at the same time. Think about that number. 500 witnesses to a single event. In today's terms, that would be like filling a small auditorium with eyewitnesses. Many of these people were still alive when the early accounts were written, offering themselves as living testimony to what they had seen. The change in the followers is perhaps the most powerful evidence of all. These weren't wealthy individuals or people of influence. They were ordinary people, fishermen, tax collectors, laborers, yet something transformed them into unstoppable messengers of hope. Consider Peter, the fisherman who had denied even knowing Jesus during the trial. What could transform a man from hiding in fear to standing boldly before thousands? The same Peter who had run away in terror now stood in the very city where these events took place, challenging the authorities to explain the empty tomb. Or think about James, the skeptical brother who had thought his brother was out of his mind. After his own encounter with the risen Christ, he became a leader in the Jerusalem church, eventually giving his life for what he knew to be true. What could cause such a dramatic transformation in a family member who had been a critic? The authenticity of these witnesses becomes even more compelling when we consider what they gained, or rather, what they lost, by telling their story. They didn't achieve wealth, power, or status. Instead, they faced persecution, imprisonment, and death. Yet they maintained their testimony. History tells us that 11 of the 12 closest followers were eventually killed for refusing to deny what they had witnessed. Think about that. These men went to their deaths maintaining the truth of what they had seen. People might die for something they believed to be true, but who would die for something they knew to be a lie? Despite intense opposition, the message spread like wildfire. Within weeks, thousands in Jerusalem had joined the movement. Within months, it had spread throughout Judea and Samaria. Within years, it had reached the heart of the Roman Empire. What makes this spread even more remarkable is that it happened without political power, military force, or social influence. This wasn't a movement spread by conquest or coercion. It was spread by transformed lives and unshakable testimony. The message reached across every social barrier. Rich and poor, educated and illiterate, Jews and Gentiles, people from every background found their lives transformed. In a world rigidly divided by social status, ethnicity, and gender, this message declared that all people had equal access to divine love and forgiveness. But this isn't just ancient history. The impact of these 7 events continues to reverberate through our world today. Every time a life is transformed, every time hope overcomes despair, every time love conquers hatred, we see the ongoing power of what began in Jerusalem. Think about it. 2,000 years later, these events still spark debate, inspire faith, and transform lives. The tomb that was sealed with a Roman seal remains empty. The movement that began with a small group of frightened followers has spread to every corner of the globe. As we conclude our journey through these 7 extraordinary events, we're left with a profound question. What do these events mean for us today? The same power that shook Jerusalem, that transformed lives, that launched a worldwide movement is still at work in our world. The invitation remains open to examine the evidence, to consider the implications, and to experience the transformation for ourselves. These weren't just historical events to be studied. They were world-changing moments that continue to offer hope, purpose, and new life to all who embrace their message. Before we end, I want to speak directly to you. You've journeyed with me through these remarkable events. You've witnessed the darkness that covered Jerusalem, felt the earth shake, seen the temple curtain torn in two. You've met the guards who fell like dead men, the women who found the empty tomb, and the countless witnesses whose lives were transformed. Now it's your turn to respond. Share this message with others who need to hear it. Help spread this story of hope and transformation to a world that desperately needs it. Subscribe to this channel for more incredible journeys through history's most transformative moments. Remember, these 7 events didn't just change Jerusalem, they changed the course of human history, and they continue to change lives today, one person at a time. Thank you for joining me on this extraordinary journey. Until next time, keep seeking truth, embracing hope, and sharing the light.